Amanda, did you hear about the badonky?
Badonky?
Badonky.
You mean bad achy?
Yeah, the bad achy. No shit. BAD8. G. I don't know.
Warning. The topics discussed on this podcast are subject to adult themes and languages. We seek to unravel the unexplained and unknown. This is Encounters.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Encounters. My name's Dakota.
I'm Amanda.
And today, we are talking about Mothman!
Ah!
Mothman!
Mothman.
Yeah.
Did you know they actually got the name Mothman from Batman? Like the press.
No.
Did you know? Oh.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I love it more.
Right? Supposedly they got the name for Mothman, the press did.
That's interesting.
From a Batman episode.
I've got a copy of the Chicago Reader with the Chicago Mothman in a frame here in the office. Yeah, we're going back to 1966. No, that makes it sound like a haunting.
Actually, sightings of Mothman have been like around forever.
This is true.
Like,
I mean, there's even ideology that goes back to say that sightings of the early like angels and what people may have interpreted as angels could be these creatures.
Yeah.
And harpies in Vietnam.
Oh.
And don't forget about your flying raptor thunder gods.
Yes.
Of North America.
Yes, so they've been like in every. It kind of remind me of like werewolves and every other thing we cover. They're always everywhere.
Everywhere. Oh, and if you guys were wondering, the flying raptor gods were the badonkeys with the 8 in the name. So, what is a Mothman?
Are you asking me?
I am asking you. What is a Mothman, Amanda?
Well, it's kind of like a giant bird-like creature that has like a few human traits, but it's mostly like a bird. And it's tended to be about 5 to 7 feet tall. And normally they say the wingspan is like ginormous, like up to 10 feet tall. 10 feet long, I mean. And the most like interesting and captivating thing about these creatures are the red glowing eyes. People, when they see these red glowing eyes, say that fear just overtakes them. It's spine tingling. It often causes some very intense reactions.
Conjunctivitis.
We'll get into all that in a second. Another thing about Mothman is they have legs but don't normally have feet. And they don't really have arms. Like I said, they have wings. And they don't flap their wings to fly. They actually, like, glide. And often when they take off, it looks like they're just jumping into the air and just gliding.
Like levitating.
Yeah, so these things are pretty freaky and ginormous and scary. And they don't have heads.
What do you mean they don't have heads? They have heads.
They don't. Yeah, but it's not like a normal head. It's not like there's a head. A lot of people say it looks like it's in their chest, like their heads are kind of
the eyes seem
shape.
Low for when the creature stands at like full height. The eyes seem to set a little bit lower towards the chest, almost as if this thing has no neck. Which, being a moth or an owl, which early sightings of Mothman, even before Point Pleasant, were even depictions of like this owl man creature flying through the sky. So, yeah, no, low set red eyes that cause conjunctivitis. Not friendly.
Not friendly, but aren't known to kill people. But they are bringers of doom.
Well, they're said to be like omens, harbingers of doom.
Yes.
Not causing damage and
Well, it depends.
I know, psychological damage, goddamn.
Well, no. I'm just saying, even, like, some people said they saw the Mothman by the bridge, and some people, or they'll say they'll see Mothmen around wherever the tragedy will strike. So some people don't know if they're more angels, where they're trying to warn you, or actual bringers of doom. It's up for debate.
Yeah, I mean, there's even reports of a man shooting one and stuffing it and putting it on display. But we'll get to that later. So, the big Mothman craze, the biggest story that we have connected to Mothman is Point Pleasant.
Yes. The sleepy little farming town.
A big contribution to the Mothman lore that we know is thanks to John Keel and Mary Hyre. So, these encounters take place over the course of a year from 1966 to 1967.
The thing about this town, before we kind of get into these stories, it's a small town. About 5,000 people live there. It's just a small little sleepy town. I don't know why I keep calling it sleepy. They did not sleep after this.
They did not sleep during this. They don't sleep now. Well, actually, they probably sleep pretty damn good now. I mean, those Mothman pancakes look like they would put me to sleep.
Yeah. But a lot of people think these people were like hillbillies and whatnot, but these were your just run-of-the-mill
regular folk, guys.
Right? And some of the people whose stories were told were firemen, police officers. So a lot of different people with a lot of credibility were seeing this Mothman over this year.
There's really 4 major encounters with the Mothman that we have before things went buck wild. These 4 encounters are what happened before the press got a hold of the story of Mothman. Yes. So these are the ones that are considered to be the least influenced, most credible. That's the right word. Yeah.
I say that with a question mark.
I know, right?
And most of these happened with groups. There's only one that is just one person. So these are groups of people before the press got hold who saw this thing. So this first encounter starts November 12th, 1966, where 5 men were out in a cemetery near West Virginia, and they say they saw what looked like a man come out of the tree and like fly low above their heads. So this man thingy just like jumps out at them and kind of just glides on past them. And all 5 of these men see it. But they don't actually report anything to the police yet.
And then there's a farmer who is out on his back porch with his dog, and he happens to be looking out into the forested area, and standing in this tree is this big shadowy creature. He said it looked like it had its wings folded behind its back. But the thing he could see the most were the giant red eyes in the tree. It's at that moment that the thing let out this horrifying scream. And his dog went out after it. And he turned and went back in the house and...
Well, he went back in the house to get his gun, and then he realized, he was like, you know what, that's not a good idea. And just stayed inside. And I did not mention the grave diggers also saw the red eyes too.
A big contender in the Mothman story, in fact, one that would set the world aflame, was that of the 2 young couples, November 15th, 1966. They were out joyriding on the highway in their 1957 Chevy out by the TNT area in Point Pleasant. The TNT area is where supplies were stored and ammunition was stored during World War II in the area. And so it was kind of a remote area. Nobody was really out there. There was the bird sanctuary, there was the nature preserve, there was the TNT area, and country. So they were out driving on the road Linda and Roger Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millette were out by the power plant when they suddenly saw two red eyes reflecting in the car's headlights. When they were coming up towards the creature, they said that they noticed that it looked like a gray man with wings tucked behind his back. The creature didn't run, but kind of wobbled with balance as it came to standing position. It was about 7 foot tall, half man and half monster. And one of the ladies even remarks you could see the muscles, so definitely. You could even see the muscles in his legs. Well, they drove off on Route 62 as fast as they could, believing that what the fuck did we just see? So they're hauling ass down this road, and they turn to look back, and Linda yells that she can see the thing flying after them. All they see are these two red eyes hovering, keeping up with their car. They start to kick up the speed, even going so much as 100 miles per hour, according to them. And it was still able to keep up. Then it caught up to the car, and they said you could hear the wings hitting the top of the car as they drove on. It was even said to have left scratch marks on Roger's 57 Chevy. It then let out this giant screech and veered off, just completely disappeared, and they fucking hauled ass and couldn't believe what they had seen.
So when they get to the police station, they tell them about this creature, how they saw what looked like a dog. It had a body of a dog. They couldn't tell what size dog it was or what kind of dog it was. They just said it was a bigger dog. And so knowing these kids since pretty much their entire life, the sheriff goes back out with Roger to the site to see if they could find any signs of the creature, see if they could find the dog, anything. And when they went back, they said there was nothing. They didn't find anything.
Yeah, they just heard these strange staticky sounds coming from their radios that nobody could really explain. But other people said while they were out searching the area, some saw shadows circling nearby and dust kicking up. But nothing else really came of it.
Nope. And the sheriff decided to hold a press conference the next day. But at this press conference, that's when the couples got to share their story. All I'm going to say about this press conference is that it happened. And that's how the media got it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point where they say that they took the name of Mothman from Batman. And the sheriff is even known as quoting, "We understand people are laughing at us, but we wouldn't make this up to make us all look like fools."
Right. But that's really how the media gets involved with this. And that's kind of how John Keel eventually finds out. But before all of this can even happen, that night, Marcella Bennett was driving out towards the TNT area to a friend's house who lives kind of right on the outskirts of town. Her 3-year-old daughter, and her brother. And when they arrived at her friend's house, the brother said that he saw lights in the sky. And she kept telling Marcella to come over and to look at the lights. And she's like, I don't have time for any lights in the sky. I don't want to deal with any of that. So she gets her baby and she's making her way towards the door when she says she sees something kind of in the shadows kind of appear. And she says it looks like a giant man and then these glowing red eyes. And she said those eyes scared her so bad that she pretty much collapsed to the ground with her baby in her hands. She said she fell kind of on top of her to kind of protect her from whatever it was, but also she was so scared that she could not move. She was just paralyzed with fear. And she's like, I knew I needed to get up. I had to go inside, but I was just so scared. Finally, she collects herself and she makes their way inside. They rush inside the house. And they say at that time the Mothman leaves, but soon reappears looking through their window and on the porch, just scaring the ever-living crap out of them. So they decide to call the cops, and by the time the cops got there, the thing had disappeared. The creature had affected Marcella so bad, she ended up having to go to the hospital to seek treatment. She was having nightmares. It was just really messed with her mind. And those are kind of like the first encounters people start having with the Mothman.
Yeah, because after these first 4 like major encounters, the Mothman pretty much appears throughout Point Pleasant. There are hundreds of sightings of this thing.
Sometimes it's flying, and other times it's kind of stalking around people's houses.
And with this thing come other creatures of the night. This is where we start to be introduced to the Men in Black and certain extraterrestrial creatures that start to appear. We have Ingrid Cold, or as Amanda found out, the Smiling Man, who appears. And with all of this activity, that's why we get John Keel. John Keel was a paranormal UFO investigator. That was his major thing. He was all about the UFOs. And Mothman Prophecies is actually a thrilling read about his like investigative case in Point Pleasant. In fact, the first chapter is really interesting because it talks about the concept of perception. It starts with the chapter called Beelzebub Came to West Virginia. And it talks about a man appearing at a couple's house and knocking on the door asking to use their phone. He doesn't look like anyone they know. Apparently, it's the 60s. He's got a beard. He's got long hair. And the era of Charles Manson running around. So they refuse to let him come in and use the phone. And so he goes on about their way. And they were pretty sure that the devil had just visited them that night.
Yeah.
But it turns out by the end of the chapter, it was John Keel, whose car had broken down while he was trying to get to Point Pleasant to meet Mary, and was like trying to get a mechanic, and nobody wanted to let him in because he looked like a stranger.
Because he was a stranger.
But the book is got numerous, exponential, and it's not limited to just Point Pleasant. He goes back to the 1800s. He goes back to Thunderbird traditions. He goes back to all these different wonderful things, and as he kind of divests, the novel really resolves into this year that Point Pleasant experienced with all of these different activities. Can't really call them paranormal. Supernatural?
Yeah, because it wasn't just Mothman. It was also like they saw a lot of UFOs.
A lot of UFOs. In fact, the 60s was UFO craze.
Right.
They were everywhere.
But especially in this town. I think I was watching a documentary when John Keel was talking and some other people who were around during this time, and they said almost every single night there was multicolored lights in the sky.
And these visits from very strange men, dressed all in black, that could barely speak. In fact, Mary has one that she talks about in the book where this man comes to her and is like asking her all these questions and ultimately asks her, what would you say if someone told you to stop writing about UFOs? And she was like, well, I'd tell him to screw off. And he was like, what would you say? And it's not just Mary. There's a handful of people that have these relatable experiences of these men in black. And actually, it wasn't John Keel who first coined Mothman or Men in Black in literature. It was Gray Barker with his The Silver Bridge book. But he was a contemporary of John Keel. And John Keel then went in as an investigative reporter and even himself had an experience.
With the Men in Black?
Well, with the Mothman.
Oh. Before we move on from the Men in Black, there's just one quick story I wanted to talk about, and this woman named Connie Carpenter. And she was very, very affected with her Mothman sighting that she kind of didn't go outside anymore. Didn't let people, when her husband wasn't around, she didn't let people in her house. She didn't really go out very often. But one day she was out by her car in her driveway when another car pulled up, and she said there was a man in black who tried to grab her and like pull her into the van, but she was able to get away and run into her house. The next day she found a note telling her not to talk about the Mothman anymore and kind of threatening her.
That's the thing that's really a misunderstood element of the Men in Black. I think it's because of the movie with Will Smith. We think these are like super secret government agencies bent on protecting us, when in fact...
They're super secret government agencies, but they're not trying to help.
No, I don't even know if they're agencies. A lot of the way that people report Men in Black experiences are almost like they're extraterrestrials trying to blend in to make you feel comfortable. Like they assume a non-threatening form but can't fully complete the human visage.
Yeah, very true.
There's an encounter with a Men in Black in, I believe, New York, where he comes in and asks for food. And the woman's like, what do you want? And he was like, food.
Right.
And she was like, oh, what about a steak? And he was like, yes. And when the steak came out, he just stared at it. And so she ended up showing him how to use the fork and knife. And then apparently he consumed the whole thing immediately and just got up and left.
That's kind of insane.
But we do have paranormal activity that happens. Well, I don't know. They talk about it being poltergeist activity, but it could be extraterrestrial activity that happens at the Scarberry house in the year that happens. They experience a lot of radio beeps, frequency changes throughout the house, phone calls from nowhere, phone calls that don't have anyone on the other end, lots of beeping and physical movements and shaking that happens. But we also do get other signs of actual UFO activity with the animal mutilations that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, the buttholes that get taken.
Why?
Aliens got a freaky thing for that booty hole.
Well, supposedly that's like how you can tell if something's has radiation too.
Oh, that's a good point. Speaking of, that's where the conjunctivitis comes in.
Yeah.
In a lot of these cases, some of the people that have actually seen the Mothman creature and looked it directly into its red eyes had a high dose of conjunctivitis as a side effect. And John Keel goes on to explain that it's because of high level of photonic rays that hit the eye. It's like an ultraviolet ray, and your eyes aren't meant to look at it. It's almost like looking at the sun while it's in eclipse.
They also found burns on their skin too.
Yeah,
right?
like radiation burns.
There's another really mind-blowing fact about the Mothman, which has to do with blood. Did you get this, Dakota?
No, blood.
Okay. Yes, so one day, guess what van got chased down by the Mothman? The Red Cross Bloodmobile. And they notice a lot of the times with the animal mutilation, all the blood would be gone. But another thing John Keel found out was when he started asking some of the women if they were on their menstrual cycles, most of them actually were. Anyway.
So, pretty much all of this culminates for John Keel to a major interaction with the Mothman at the abandoned TNT factory, or in the TNT area. So, December 7th, 1966, at 9 p.m., John Keel and Mary Hyre went to the TNT area with about 5 other people. And this is like the climax of the movie. I mean, as far as Mothman goes, with Richard Gere. They went to this abandoned power plant to look for the creature. And as they were climbing around in the building, they saw nothing. When they went to leave, one of the girls turned around and looked and suddenly became immediately panicked. She said she witnessed some glowing red eyes in the factory, and then they all ran out of the building, freaked out. John himself stayed in the building and was trying to investigate to see if he could find anything in the building that would reflect red with his flashlight. This was the closest he had gotten to the creature, and he wanted to make sure that it was the creature itself. As soon as he walked into the space that the girl had seen the creature, he became immediately freaked out. Then, the group outside the factory heard a loud metallic noise and saw a humanoid figure disappear before Keel came out of the building. After she heard the sound, some of the lady's ears began bleeding. John Keel never actually managed to see the Mothman himself, and it's unclear if Mary Hyre actually saw it either. but they definitely thought they heard the scream of the Mothman. There's also an encounter where John Keel is driving, and they talk about this zone of fear that the Mothman carries around it. Like, the moment that you step into its presence, or you're in the presence of the Mothman, you become inexplicably afraid. There's a moment where John Keel is driving out in the TNT area, and he actually finds this cone of dread, and he's just driving along, and all of a sudden he feels completely terrified. And he drives through about a mile and gets out of it, and he's like, whoa, I feel fine. So he turns around, he drives back through it, and immediately gets the same feeling. And then he does the unthinkable and gets out of his car and walks through this zone of dread. In D&D, it's like a barrier, it's a force field. But it's interesting to see that this thing carries its own atmosphere around it as it moves.
Yeah, and a lot of people after experiencing the Mothman have really extreme fears, psychological distress, and a bunch of them end up getting hospitalized for a while just to kind of get back to normal after encountering the Mothman.
Which, I mean, we talked about last week with Stephen LeChant. The aftershocks of dealing with anything supernatural, extraterrestrial, paranormal can be overwhelming and, to an extent, break a person. The true climax of the Point Pleasant story, though, is that all of these encounters end December 15th, 1967, when the Silver Bridge collapsed in Point Pleasant. 46 people died. There are some people that report saying that they saw Mothman right on the bridge before it collapsed. There's other people that say they saw a bright flash of light and then remember seeing red eyes when the bridge collapsed. Most people remember hearing the tearing and twisting of the steel as it broke under its own weight.
The crazy thing is, the thing that brought down the bridge was a bad pin. It was the 13th pin, and it was not placed correctly. And the bridge was not really a well taken care of bridge. And they said it's actually amazing that it lasted as long as it did. But a lot of people who believe in the Mothman believe the Mothman has something to do with it. And it's very crazy that the 13th pin is the reason that whole bridge came tumbling down. Didn't Mary Hyre have dreams about it before it happened?
Yes. Which goes along with a lot of the paranormal aspects of this case. People were receiving like telepathic messages and visions and phone calls. Visits and... But you know, this isn't the only tragedy that Mothman is attributed to.
What is?
In August of 2007, the I-35 West Mississippi Bridge also collapsed. And 13 people were killed and 145 people were injured as the bridge collapsed. And afterwards, people came out and said that they had seen flying bird creatures for months with large red eyes that were 10 feet tall with huge wingspans. And when people were like, okay, well, why are you now telling us this? They were like, would you have believed me if I told you there was a 10-foot moth flying around with
Birdman, right?
Glowing red eyes?
Right.
And to that person, I say yes. I would.
And America's not the only place that has Mothman encounters.
Not at all.
And in 1985 in Mexico City, people claimed to see a giant bird-like creature with red eyes flying around before a devastating earthquake. But I think for me, the most kind of creepy one was in Chernobyl in 1986. For several months, they claimed to see a giant bird man flying over the power plant there before this nuclear meltdown happened. And they actually called this the Black Bird of Chernobyl. So it's kind of interesting how it sticks towards radiation and bridge collapses.
Yeah, well, there's also a story in Freiburg, Germany, where they have the Schreiberg Shrieker, where 21 miners arrived at work that morning and they saw this dark figure with dark bat wings at the back entrance. As they went to approach it, it screamed at them. Like, they said it let out a scream like 50 people, or a train in peril trying to brake at a sight of the twisted rail. Which, I heard that shit walking home today. You know what? I did. I was like, I think there's the Mothman out here. What the fuck is going on? God, I cannot stand this.
Oh, gosh.
So, instead of going into the mine towards this thing, they all stayed away, kind of just backed away from it. And right as they did, the mine exploded. And there were 6 people in the mine and they were injured, but the others were saved because they didn't even go in there. They also all ended up institutionalized for psychiatric problems from paranormal torment. But basically, it's the Mothman. But there's a lot of conspiracies and arguments against Mothman even being a real thing.
This kind of makes me... I don't know how to feel about it.
I know. Some of the arguments are actually logical and do make you go, okay, I can see that. I don't know if that's what it is, but okay. Specifically, the argument that Mothman is actually an owl.
A giant owl.
Well, no, not even a giant owl. And the reason they give this is because when light is refracted onto the eyes of the owl, they glow, like the flashback is red. And some of the videos I saw of like flashlights on owls and like lights and owl eyes and whatnot, yes, definitely. Doesn't explain the conjunctivitis unless...
It would have to be kind of a giant owl for the people who saw it and said it was 7 feet tall.
Well, the argument they throw at that is that and it's true, the human mind, when it sees things in the dark, will exaggerate it because there's not enough of the image to actually sustain. So the human mind says it'll elongate it. And a lot of these encounters with some of these people... This thing is in a tree and they see it really quick. It screams, flies away. So what's really left to desire? I don't know about the Scarberry tale though.
Or Mary Bennett.
Right?
Or not Mary. Or Bennett.
These major cases, I don't know. Some of the smaller cases and the multiple reports, yes, I can see that maybe. But with the 4 cases we've talked about, I don't know how a snowy owl is going to hit the roof of the car with wings and eat a German Shepherd, which was the breed of the dog that went missing.
Professor Smith also said he thought it might be a sandhill crane.
What kind of crane is attacking people?
Well, the reason he thinks that is because these cranes are actually quite large, though they're only 4 to 6 feet tall, and they're really skinny. I saw one of the survivors, I'm sorry, not survivors. One of the witnesses say he knew it wasn't a crane because it was, one thing, the wrong color, and 2, it was way too skinny. This, just like the couple said, this thing was muscular. She could see the muscles on this thing.
Yeah, there's even an artist's rendition of the Mothman. You should check out the sculpture. It's got muscles on muscles on muscles.
Looking like John Cena.
It's got ass goals. Like, the statue of Mothman made me go, I need to start squatting.
Right.
Bird. Ain't no bird.
It's not.
Early reports did say that it was mixed with owl. It was like an owl creature. There was a bat wings creature. There's moth. And the moth is what prevails. What really gets me is the low set eyes really does kind of work for the owl in some regard.
That's true. And some people say because, the TNT area had a bunch of toxic waste. They're like, what if it is just a mutated bird that's gotten into this toxic waste and kind of just like, whatever.
But radiation doesn't work that way. You don't fall into some toxic waste and become an angel man. No, I'm not saying at you. I'm saying in general. That's the argument that's thrown out against it.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if an owl flew into Chernobyl as it melted, I wouldn't be surprised if it came out as a goddamn Mothman. I've seen the X-Files episode with the worm that came from there. I am not fucking with Chernobyl.
I watched the Chernobyl Diaries, I think. With Jesse McCartney, I think is in it.
I don't know.
Random. Anyway.
Well, there's even an encounter with Asa Henry, who was a Point Pleasant resident who claimed to have shot one of these. And when it was investigated a couple years later, like, the guy was like, that is a snow owl. He was like, no, it's a Mothman. And they were like, no, that's an owl. That's definitely an owl. Don't you see it's an owl? The TNT area was also surrounded by a bird sanctuary. But real or not, what we need to know is Mothman's back, y'all. He's here in Chicago.
I mean, right? There's been a lot of sightings.
Yeah.
In Chicago. Which I asked Dakota earlier. I was like, so with all these sightings, are you scared about living in Chicago? And what did you say to me?
Hell no. That's the reason I moved here. I want to go have lunch with the Mothman. I'm a fan.
Oh my gosh.
I fucking love the Mothman.
Are you going to go to the festival? Should we go to the Mothman Festival?
Yeah, if we ever get the funds, we should go.
I think they're in September, right?
Yeah, it's in September. September 15th, I think.
We'll get you some Mothman pizza.
Yes!
Pancakes.
The red eyes are popping back up all over Chicago. He's starting to gain the more owl-like features. They're saying it looks more feathered, but the red eyes remain the same, and the dread and fear are also there. The first encounter is actually by a night shift security guard in Logan Square. There was a plane flying, and he said he saw something flying really close to it, and it looked like a bat or a pterodactyl or some kind of thing, but it had a really skinny, small head. As it started doing this swooping, undulating up and down motion, it just flew away from the plane. A lot of other people have reported a large black bat being with glowing red eyes, a big owl, a gothic gargoyle, and straight up Mothman.
Right.
And y'all, it's not the first time Mothman's been in Illinois. He was appearing in Illinois all throughout 66 and 67 as well. But the question remains, what is he trying to predict? Until we start seeing him again, I am not getting on no bridges. I promise you that.
No bridges, no power plants. Don't be hanging out at power plants, Dakota.
I'm telling you, I'm going to find him. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and get him on the episode. How about that?
Join us next week when we have Mothman live in studio.
And then Dakota has to go to Dr. Phil.
Oh my god, I want to go to Dr. Phil so bad.
Why?
I don't know. Seems fun. And that's Mothman.
Well, that's not Mothman.
Hey.
Okay, so we're going to be like jumping in and out of different Mothman stuff. We're going to come back and bring you the spooky stories of Ingrid Cold. We're going to bring you some more information on the Men in Black. But this is the main overview of the cryptid Mothman that went into Point Pleasant from 66 to 67 and then disappeared.
Mothman! And all the sightings pretty much stopped after that. I don't know.
All the sightings stopped.
So some people thought it was for tourism, but I don't know. It don't seem like the people who
I mean, now it's for tourism. Shit, we're going to the festival, hopefully.
But anyway.
Join us next week when we talk about Krampus. And the origins of Christmas or Saturnalia. You know, we're going to give you some more pagan updates on your holiday special.
Yes.
Major shout out to Brian at Cash America for the amazing hookup for Amanda's new recording system.
Woo-hoo.
Just want to say thank you to Brian and to Cash America. You've literally provided us most of our studio at a very awesome price, and we can't thank you enough. If you like what you hear, find us on Facebook at Encounters a Paranormal Experience. You can also find us on Instagram at Encounters a Paranormal, Tumblr, Encounters a Paranormal EXP, and YouTube, Encounters a Paranormal Experience.
If you like us, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes.
And until next time, I'm Dakota.
I'm Amanda.
Stay spooky.
Don't stay spooky.